Anthology. Episode 2. Technedermy. What follows is an excerpt of the May 2017 edition of Décollage Art Magazine. Voiceless Artist, Silent Peace, The Marred Works of Gwynevere Croen, by Bartholomew Mann. 2 stars. Published on the 19th of May 2017. With the infamous auteur's sudden return, it would seem that the dead do indeed speak. But is it anything we haven't heard before? The gallery had been all but abandoned by the time I arrived. Not simply vacated, also hollowed in the way a swamp is drained or a cavity excavated. A lingering revulsion hung in that place, and as my Louboutins clacked against the cheap linoleum, it was difficult not to take note of the scant few patrons who milled about, with nodding heads and crumpled pamphlets, of the beading sweat that coated every one of their blushed faces, of the one place not one of their gazes would dare come to rest. Their eyes flickered across the same few pieces that spattered the hall again and again, their pale, sallow glances giving the briefest touch to the doorway that led deeper into the gallery. I passed them by, striding to the small plaque set to the doorframe side, stopping just short of crossing into the darkened hallway, and read the words you have undoubtedly already guessed were carved within the steel. The Croen exhibit. A simple name, though simplicity is a tool Miss Croen has made frequent use of in her previous exhibitions. The last I had attended in the year before her extended hiatus had been an equally modest affair in both square feet and scope, though it had been her usual paintings lining the walls then, brushes marring canvases in tight, pale strokes, hung atop dull grey stone and smelling slightly of mildew. I will spare my readers an echoing of my thoughts on the works in question, and conclude by saying I was grateful for the complimentary drinks that followed the display. But I digress. There is a phrase that anyone who has ever observed a piece of creative work has uttered, one that, once heard, latches itself to the mind in a mimetic parasitism, burrowing into the soft and fleshy meat of the brain and biding its time, waiting for the moment when the observer is met with a piece so dull and yet so inexplicably beloved that all they can do is hatch the words while their true thoughts worry away at their lips, scrabbling like a broken thing at the cellar door. It speaks to me. If you are invested enough in the world of the arts to be reading these words, then this phrase has assuredly papered the walls of your waking nightmares over the past month. It is understandable, of course, if an artist at the center of one of the most infamous missing persons cases of the modern age suddenly debuts a new piece, penning a review declaring it milquetoast at best, is unlikely to draw in the kind of readers an online magazine requires in this economy. Fortunately, I have already been paid. The titular Croen's new piece, once you have made your way through the layers of theatrical darkness and twisting, curdled halls, is boring. I had heard tell of its nature, of course. It had been almost unavoidable in the days following its sudden appearance and subsequent recovery from her Llandav home. Some called it a masterpiece, others a suicide note. Early reports initially claimed it was what remained of her corpse, and her failure to make a public appearance in the ensuing media storm have only fueled the fire of intrigue. However, from where I sit with fingers poised to dancing across antique keys, trying to recall what I felt upon entering that space, with a piece hung like a metronome without time to keep, I struggle to recall any stirring within me at all. This brings us, rather lumberingly, to the work in question. Croen's Flayed is a remarkably self-descriptive piece on every level imaginable. And if you must abandon the remainder of this review in order to attend something more engaging, like, say, a slug trying to inch its way out of a bucket of tar, then rest easy, knowing that that is essentially all there is to say on the matter. Upon first entering the room where it is housed, you are met with what most likely was intended to be a total darkness. Unfortunately, it would seem the good people of the Moon Gallery have failed to cut the blackout curtains to the required size, and so the featureless ink of the veiled sun becomes nothing more than a rather dimly lit storage unit. After a moment's passing, there comes a sound, the thrumming of fledgling electronics, all sparks and crackles and the heady reek of ozone, before a thin spotlight flickers to life somewhere above, and the raucous chaos gives way to a gentle hum. Tracing that light from where it sits amongst the groaning steel of the rafters, you come to rest at what you were there to see all along. Skin. It feels almost unnecessary to describe exactly what hangs there in the imperfect dark, swaddled in the pale light of half-dead bulbs. Unless you have spent the better part of a month without Wi-Fi or dead, then you have seen the pictures, smearing every device capable of displaying a JPEG like a mimetic astigmatism. Nevertheless, when future art historians are attempting to divine the mania this work has incited, long after the thing itself has no doubt been discarded as the derivative novelty it always was, perhaps these words shall be their only remaining tether to the attitudes that spawned it. And isn't that just a pleasant thought? Blade is, as one could herald a guess, a replica of its creator's own skin, hung by fishing wire and suspended just enough to give the illusion of an autonomous verticality. In the harsh light, it is initially a strain to pass the unfurlment of sagging nudity. Croen was not an unattractive woman by all accounts, but strung as she was, the thinness of the flesh had given way beneath itself, creating small pockets of bulbous mass where there should be smooth skin, concave shadows where muscles should sit. In spite of this, it remains just human enough in silhouette that the little anachronisms require a double take. Only then does it begin to worry at you, your mind peeling and unpicking each layer of the uncanny until you are unsure as to how you could have seen anything of a person in it at all. Standing mere inches from its slackened features, something begins to nag, something that cannot be placed beneath the lank, ropey hair and lingering flakes of long-dried blush. It is a strange sensation to see so much you recognize in a face, and yet for there to be so much of it absent. I suspect this is what had so finely curated the unease of the other patrons. And little wonder, the now infamous police sketch that followed her disappearance is the most evocative piece in her portfolio, simply for how even beneath the shapeless flailing of a 2B pencil on printed paper, those eyes managed to blaze. I had argued at the time against the flooding of conspiracies, of whatever fancy it was that had gashed the headline that day, suggesting the event itself as a bespoke unveiling of a new artistic endeavour that would surely dredge Croen from the mire her work had entrenched her in. Stood as I was then, before the hanging skin with its hollow sockets and stolen scream, I realised that I had been mistaken. There is nothing new to see in this piece. No greater insight into the mind of one whom the media had clamoured to know. Only a derivative waste of floor space, entering the creative spectrum on the ground floor. It begs the question, what was Croen doing all this time? The answer seems to lay in the technical skill, while what meagre spark of vision that remained in Miss Croen presumably withered and died unmourned, her efficiency has accelerated to an almost impossible degree. The skin is masterfully moulded, every inch of its crumpled form radiating a living, thriving sickness. Stood before it, there comes a moment where you are taken by the strangest idea. The thought that if you were to reach out and brush against it, the dregs of warmth dissipating into the evening's chill could still be felt against your fingertips. Most intriguing, however, is what it looks like on the inside, the wetness of the stuff. If you have ever scraped your knee as a child, you will remember just how much comes away when skin is taken. The little scraps of greying meat, the thin coating of blood spread like marmalade on hot toast, all the little imperfections that in themselves become fresh violence when you dare to look and make the pain new, real. Considering Miss Croen's work is entirely without seam, the degree to which it simulates reality seems doubly impossible, and I can only hazard a guess as to how it was achieved. Perhaps an artisan brush on the end of a broomstick. But if nothing else, it succeeds in creating the impression of someone having cut themselves out of their own body, lips first, worming through their own gaping mouth, one stroke of the filleting knife at a time. In closing, the piece is provocative, and certainly effective enough in the moment, but as I passed through the reception door I felt unease slip from me like snakeskin under the evening sky. It is easy to provoke. A child with a tin drum can provoke, but rarely is said child then offered a place within the Vienna Philharmonic, flayed, while managing to conjure a certain cocktail of primal dread, passes just as quickly, leaving nothing but a lingering sense of anticlimax. While some may find this display cathartic in its closure, Croen's latest is more media exercise than masterpiece. Perhaps one day we will see something of the creative beneath the layers of trepidity. But until then, I recommend you save the admission fee for something worth your time, like a visit to the dermatologist. Addendum. Case number 0011037. Date 30th of May 2017. Reporting Officer Deputy Dunscombe. Incident type: robbery, homicide. Address of occurrence: Cal Moon Gallery, Cardiff, CF 27 4RW. Witnesses: none available. Evidence: footprints, bloody, recovered from windowsill. Corpse of Edward Ahir, gallery security. Journal entry: discovered at suspect residence. See supplemental material. Weapons, objects used: Otto Mueller 1881 series Deber knife. On the 25th of May, at approximately 2:05 in the morning, the silent alarm for the Moon Gallery was tripped, noting a disturbance in the left wing. Deputy Wood arrived at the scene to find it locked, showing no signs of a forced entry. He attempted to draw security attention to the entrance, but found no answer, and in accordance with protocol, he then searched the perimeter for any sign of distress. Wood then discovered a broken window to the ground floor's southeastern side. Forces were dispatched along with gallery caretaker Callum Carroll, who admitted the officers through the front door. Within the reception area, the guard on duty, Edward Ahir, was discovered slumped against the eastern wall. He had severe lacerations across his face and hands, and a blood-stained knife, see inventory, in his lap. Ahir was pronounced dead at the scene, cause of death since having been determined as blood loss. Upon further investigation, Deputy Siobhan confirmed that only one piece had been touched. Gwynevere Croen's flayed, the gallery's centerpiece. It had been removed from its display and could not be found at the scene. It has yet to be recovered. Supplemental material: journal extract of Bartholomew Mann, discovered at residence. When I was 7 years old, the first of the warts came. Not many to begin with, just a few marring the cuticle of my nails in hard, cracked braille. I felt no pain and little discomfort, and as with all children, I cared little for aesthetics, as long as my hands were fit to play, my legs fit to pump, my lungs fit to ring with laughter and shrieks and cries for mother. In fact, I had often delighted in forming my hands into fleshy claws, baring them to my peers and playing the monster to their cries of theatrical disgust. It was a game where the toys were always within reach. I grew older, but the game would not end. They spread, rippled across my hands, the soles of my feet, the corner of my eyes. On and throughout my entire body the flesh grew bulbous and dry, swollen and crumbling, until I could not bend my fingers without the sound of skin cracking like old paint. In time, the screams of my playmates became less playful, and with a sudden lurch I was a teenager, and wreathed in a fresh insecurity, a white-hot burning shame at my condition. I did everything I could to rid myself of the blight. I bound them in rolls of choking tape, lathered them in cells that burned worse than hellfire, scraped layer after layer of half-dead flesh from their surface in hopes of carving out the worming, gnawing rot within. Nothing helped. Inevitably, time had been the cure. Though they did not vanish, they did fade, leaving small discs of pale, bloodless matter sitting and aching just beneath my every pore. Occasionally they would broach the surface in a blossom of dead tissue when stress took me, but in such cases I could hide away until the flowering receded. That is, until I touched it. Croen's skin, so unbearably smooth, so beautifully rendered, so perfect, that by the time I had taken my fingers from its shape, the warts had already begun to swell again, as if reacting to my errant thoughts of donning it, being it. Since then they have only grown worse, more numerous. My fingers are ballooned to twice their size. The flesh of my palms is cracking into great crevasses of dust and yellowed meat. I can barely see anymore. The warts crowd my eyelids, my eye sockets, my eyes. There was nothing else to be done. The doctors could not help. They could never have helped. All I have is myself. myself and an old fish knife. I think it was a gift, and I suppose that is exactly what it has been. I have already made progress on my left hand, now so red and raw and bare and clean. Within the week, the rot will be uprooted entirely. Then it is a simple matter of returning to the exhibit under cover of darkness and taking the skin, the life I have always been owed. My review will ensure that the gallery remains empty, waiting, ready. End of supplemental. The investigation is ongoing. This episode was written and narrated by M.L. Richards. The additional edits and artwork by Becky Woods. Special thanks this episode to Nathan and Lawrence. Keep on legging, lads. Follow us on our socials. Leave a 5-star review. And thank you for listening. Until next time. Good night, North Star.